Well, first up, Ghana's economy witnessed significant growth in the third quarter of this year in terms of gross domestic product. Data released by the Ghana Statistical Service showed it recorded a 6.6% growth over the same period last year. It is the highest since third quarter of 2019. Government statistician Professor Samuel Kobne-Nim has been given reasons for the growth.
In looking at it from both an oil and a non-oil perspective, we see an increase of 6.6 percentage point between the third quarter 2020 and the third quarter 2021, specifically with the third quarter 2020 standing at 40,440.3 million, increasing by about 3,000 million to 43,093.5 million for the third quarter of 2021. From a non-oil perspective, we see also about a 3,000 million change between the third quarter 2020 and the third quarter 2021. Specifically with the third quarter 2020 being 36,823.7 million and the third quarter of 2021 being 39,974.4 million, indicating about 3,000 million change between the third quarter 2020 and the third quarter 2021. The 6.6 percentage growth rate that we've recorded for the third quarter of 2021 is about the closest that we've got even in the 2020 period when COVID-19 was just setting. Indeed, in the first quarter of 2020, just ahead of the COVID-19, GDP for the period that is between the first quarter of 2019 and the first quarter of 2020, GDP was 7.0%. So this is the first time that we've recorded GDP growth rates that are higher than the GDP growth rate that we recorded throughout the COVID-19 period and has even edged closer to the GDP growth rate that we recorded during the pre-COVID-19 era, keeping in mind that we did record about 9.0 growth rate in the first quarter of 2019.
Government statistician there, Professor Samuel Kobne-Nim. So in terms of how the various sectors performed, the services sector had the highest growth rate of 13.4%, followed by the agri sector with 9.2%. However, industry contracted by 2%, indicating non-growth in that sector. Well, partner and financial advisory leader Deloitte Ghana Yalati joins me to make sense of the latest figures. Great to have you tonight. 6.6% growth in third quarter, highest since 2019. That should be some good news as we end the year.
Yes, I think, thank you very much, Daryl, and good evening to you and your viewers as well as listeners. So it's a remarkable growth. If you look at the growth that has been recorded in the first two quarters of the year. So the first quarter growth was about 3.1%, and then the second quarter was 3.9%. So for us to record not a 4% or a 5%, but a 6.6% in the third quarter, that's a remarkable growth, given that some of the expected gains that we're looking at in some sectors were not realized, but then there were some windfall in other sectors. And I think if you look at that in the context of what we are targeting as the growth rate for 2021, this is a remarkable growth. We are expecting to end the year 2021 with a growth rate of 4.4% per the last budget that was released by government. So if you look at it on average, the first quarter growth of 3.1%, second quarter growth rate of 3.9%, and a third quarter growth rate of 6.6%, we have an average growth rate of 4.5% in the first three quarters of the year. And if we are targeting 4.4%, we are on course to exceeding our targeted GDP growth rate of 4.4% in the year 2021. So that's a remarkable growth.
Yeah, which is some good news. But industry contracted by 2%. What's happening there?
That has always been the cause of one particular factor, which is the contraction in the mining sector. So we've had these challenges in the mining sector prior to COVID and even during the COVID period. We had issues with the small-scale mining, and even the large-scale mining have all resorted to what we call care and maintenance, because you can't predict the price of metals in the midst of pandemic. The only price or metal that has remained stable is gold. And so if you look at it broadly, the production of gold has not gone up significantly because we had challenges with COVID. And even with Omicron that we are having to battle with, some of these mining companies are going to continue the care and maintenance situation where they're still going to keep their staff at home and production is not going to continue. And so the contraction in the industry sector is mainly as a result of the contraction in the mining subsector, which we think that if we are not able to address the issue around COVID and the challenges that we are having in the small-scale mining sector, we're still going to have some contraction in the industry, in the mining subsector under the industry sector.
Q4 is almost ended. I don't know what the figures will look like, but how do we sustain these gains?
Yeah, so I think if you look at the trend, there are about 2 or 3 subsectors that are driving the growth. So in the main sectors, we have agri and services sector, sectors that are driving the growth. So under the agri sector, it is crop and then fishing. So if we have some policies that are going to drive demand and production of crops and the fishing subsector, we will succeed in gaining or even exceeding our target growth in the agri sector. Secondly, in the service sector, we have 2 main subsectors that are driving this growth. And it is information, communication, and technology subsectors, and the restaurant and hotel sectors. So you realize that compared to 2020, these sectors were heavily hit by the pandemic. So we recorded a contraction. Now that with COVID and we are gradually recovering from COVID, the information communication subsector is actually the driver of the economy now and a driver of most activities in the business sector. And so you realize that all the conversation around stuff like e-levy and all of that is because of a remarkable growth that has been recorded in information, communication, and technology subsectors. So if we have some policies that will enhance activities and support business that operate in the ICT sector, it will help us sustain this growth. The same way, if you are going to support the business that operates in the hotel and restaurant subsectors, we are going to sustain this growth. So I think government should look at these subsectors. Agri, you look at fishing and crop subsectors, and then in the service sector, you should also look at the restaurants and hotel subsectors as well as ICT subsectors of the services sector.
All right.
We will sustain this growth and even exceed our targets.
A final question. We're excited because, I mean, this sort of signal that we're coming out of whatever the pandemic did to us, but we now have to deal with Omicron. We've seen what is happening in the West, where countries are going back to a lockdown. So it makes you wonder, are we really out of the woods yet?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. There's a flip side to it. So the good side of it is that largely Omicron is infectious, but not as deadly. So we know that the infection rate is very high, but it's not as deadly. So with the right strategies and with the right COVID protocols being observed, we can still get around it, still be able to sustain the growth rate and still have our business activities in the midst of the Omicron. I think that's what we should aim at, just making sure that we still be able to meet our target vaccination rates. We still insist on people observing the COVID protocols. And I think we will still be able to achieve our target as we have set.
That sounds really positive. Thanks very much indeed, Yaolate, partner at Deloitte. And Merry Christmas to you, just in case we don't talk before the year ends.